Hey guys, welcome back to the BuzWeaver channel. In the late evening of Wednesday night, March the 16th, we have some interesting breaking news. Jussie Smollett has been released from jail pending an appeal of his conviction. So Jussie Smollett was released from jail Wednesday night after an Illinois appeals court granted an emergency motion by his defense attorneys. Smollett's legal team is looking to delay his sentence and grant him bond until their appeal of his conviction is decided on. So his attorneys were successful in getting an appeal, which means that he will then go back to court. So essentially, they were able to get him out of jail temporarily. And of course, just as a refresher for all of you guys who may not be aware, we have not visited this story in quite some time. The former Empire actor was sentenced last week to 30 months of felony probation, including 150 days in jail, in order to pay restitution of more than $120,000 and a $25,000 fine for making false reports to police that he was the victim of a hate crime in January 2019. Now, some of you may be familiar with some of the details surrounding Jussie Smollett, and that he was approached by some individuals who said this was MAGA country. They put a noose over his head, disparaged him, and used homophobic language, that sort of thing. And it is kind of interesting because, like what we saw with the Covington kids, with Nicholas Sandmann, and what we saw even with Kyle Rittenhouse, we saw the mainstream media, activists, and the left immediately use this as leverage. And in the case of the Covington kids and Nicholas Sandmann, of course, he's suing defamation and slander. And of course, the same was said about Kyle Rittenhouse. Even the President of the United States, Joe Biden, had called Kyle Rittenhouse a white supremacist. So this is what happens when you have knee-jerk reactions, when you base things and do things from an emotional standpoint. And this is very indicative of what we can expect. And I don't necessarily say this as a negative or as a bad thing about individuals who are Democrats or on the left. I know it's very general terms, but suffice to say, individuals on the left, activist types, Democrats, and so forth, as we've mentioned before, they're good intentions, but they're also very emotional, and they come from a very emotional position. And so they have a tendency to act this way, this kind of impulsive passion response, instead of taking a moment and reflecting on what's actually happening and going on. So here we have Jussie Smollett. He had his day in court. And of course, he was found guilty and charged for lying to the police because, of course, there was no actual individuals in MAGA country that did anything to him. And to me personally, this doesn't have a whole lot of effect on me and my life and probably many others who are listening right now. But this serves to illustrate a point that we make here on the BuzWeaver channel, and that is that the left does not hold itself to the same standards they expect from everyone else. And I just want to mention here a comment that I made here after I saw Matt Finn from Fox News, where he says Jussie Smollett has been released from jail. Appellate court agreed with his lawyers that he should be released pending the appeal of his conviction for lying to police about a racist and homophobic attack. And so that's what it was, and that's what was propagated, and that's what went all over social media, to include supporters of President Trump because of the MAGA statement, as well as President Trump. So here was yet another opportunity to not only bring attention to the cause of Jussie Smollett or LGBTQ type causes and things. And I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that any person, regardless of how you identify, should be harassed, insulted, bullied, or mistreated in any way. I'm simply saying that these are opportunities. Well, this was a situation that was created by Jussie Smollett to bring attention to himself. And I can understand that. And I can forgive him for it because it's not, he's not hurting anyone outside of the fact that sometimes when you do these things for the purposes of attention, for the purposes of your cause, whether it's PETA or climate activists or climate militants or all these sorts of things, everybody, even if you're on the right, has certain levels of exaggeration, have certain levels of a desire to express in such a passionate way that, they feel oppressed, or they feel like, the world isn't treating them fairly. And so, as we've mentioned here on the channel before, and my response to this was, if people wanted an example of leftist standards not applying to them, here is an example. It's not about our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, or laws. It's about exceptions to them to suit a certain group of people. And so essentially what we have in the United States, and I mentioned this the other day, and I think someone on BitChute misunderstood me, because I've always said it, and I've said it very clearly. The United States, or let me just rephrase it again. Let me say it again. In the United States, we have like two camps, two tribes. This is probably the best way to describe it. We have one set that believes that the United States is a constitutional republic that practices democracy, okay? And then we have another group of people who believe in cultural democracy, and they practice authoritarianism and censorship. In that, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and Laws only apply in certain situations, under certain circumstances, and certain individuals are completely unaffected by them and have to have exceptions made for them, because there's this perceived notion or perception that our Constitution and Bill of Rights and Laws go against individual people, as though there's rules for certain groups of people and then there's exceptions to others, and certain individuals shouldn't have exceptions versus other individuals, if that makes any sense. So in other words, we have a set of rules that are supposed to apply to everyone, but because whether individuals don't enforce them correctly, or they're not applied in a correct manner, or there's a particular outcome of a case or a situation or a circumstance that doesn't work out for a certain group of people, then our system is, of course, a problem. It's not working the way it's supposed to. Now, I don't know very many people who have ever been stopped by the police. When the police approaches the windows, they said, "Officer, I was wrong. I was the one speeding. Hand me the ticket. I deserve this." No, what we hear is people, they may regret the situation, right? But they're not apologetic about it. They may regret that they regret that they were caught, is what it is. Or they're angry that they were caught, not so much that they regret the situation or sympathetic. Now, interestingly enough, today, this very day, Boston social justice activist Hubby scammed at least $185,000 from donors, feds say. It's interesting the way it was titled, because this particular individual belongs to a particular organization. A high-profile social justice activist in Boston and her husband used a nonprofit they founded to scam at least $185,000 from donors, who included a Black Lives Matter chapter and the local district attorney's office, federal authorities allege. Now, of course, I have to say allege because this is an ongoing investigation. But it is ironic, and it is interesting, because if you've been a subscriber to the channel, either on YouTube and are some of the newer tech sites like Rumble, Odyssey, and BitChute, thank you to all you guys who subscribe and belong there. You know that we have always talked about these particular groups of individuals. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that this is reflective of every single Black Lives member or every single activist group. But when I do mention groups like Antifa, for example, or even Black Bloc, then I am specifically talking about an entire organization. But Black Lives Matter has been infiltrated by certain groups of individuals, and it has become far more radicalized than was actually intended, right? So this was another organization that came out to try to express and will try to bring attention to groups of individuals, Black Americans or African American people here in the United States, to their causes and to their situation and their particular predicaments and things that happened to them. And that was, the BLM acting in good faith, right? In other words, you have an activist organization. They're coming out. They're getting their permits. They're participating in protests and demonstrations lawfully and legally. And then they get infiltrated by activists, and they get infiltrated by individuals that want to create problems and disrupt and take advantage of the situation. And that's what we see in this particular situation. And then, of course, we have individuals like Jussie Smollett who do these things to garner more attention. And then we have situations where individuals weren't looking for attention. They were just going about their business. And for example, like Nicholas Sandman and the Covington kids were going about their own business. And the media just interpreted what they were doing, which was incorrect. And they are paying the price for that heavily. That's why you don't hear a lot about it on social media unless you're here on the BuzWeaver channel. So if you haven't already, make sure you smack that like button and subscribe if you want to see more of this type of content. But nonetheless, Jussie Smollett has been released from jail pending an appeal for his conviction. And as we learn more about this, of course, I'll bring you more information because it's just developing. It is just happening now, and there really isn't any more details outside of what I just read here. And this basically just starts repeating the same things that we already know, and then what happened last week when he was in court, when he was sentenced, and things like that. So, as of this moment, or as of this release of the news at 9:48 p.m. Eastern Time, my time here, CNN, I believe, well, they still operate here in Atlanta, but I'm here in Atlanta. So that's what we have so far. So I just want to bring this to you guys. And as things continue to develop, I will fill you in and let you know. And I will see you guys in the next video.